Hello, my name is Vicky Smith. I'm going to talk to you about developing a research protocol and why you might find it useful. So this is a resource to support the 4Ps programme and might be particularly useful when you're undertaking the project session.
In this session, we're going to cover what is a research protocol, what should you include in a protocol, and why it's important when planning your research. So, research protocol is a detailed description of why you're doing your study, what you think it will contribute to existing evidence, and how you will do it. So, it's basically a roadmap that describes the processes and procedures that will be involved in your research project. It should be easy to follow, so it can be used by other people within a research team, and it is a document that will support your application for ethical review and review by HRA and Trust R&D teams.
So from the point that you develop your research idea and you refine it and discuss it with others and then decide on a research design, you can then move on to writing the protocol. Within the protocol, you might want to consider a number of questions before getting started. So can you provide a concise description of the problem or the question that you're seeking to answer? That would be really helpful to ensure that you can provide the context and background. You need to be able to provide a detailed description of your planned research study. So, really think through how you're going to undertake each step of that process. For example, how you're going to approach potential participants, what do you need to consider when doing that? Are there any gatekeepers that will assist you in that process? Just make sure that you've thought through all of the steps that you will need to take when you're actually undertaking your planned research study. Also thinking through how you'll organise and run your study. So what do you need to help you ensure that that study runs smoothly? Have you thought of any potential barriers to the project and how you're going to overcome them? And also make sure that your protocol is easy to understand. So just remember that when your protocol is reviewed, for example, during an ethical review process, some of the people reviewing it may have limited or no understanding of the particular topic area that you're researching, and it is important that your protocol is easy to interpret for anybody that might need to read it.
So now thinking about what your research protocol should include. You obviously want to include a title, and it's usual to have a long and short title that reflects what you're doing in your project and how you're going to do it. I would advise that you make sure you date and have a version number for all documents relating to your research project. This is particularly important when you're submitting documents for ethical review, and that includes going through the integrated research application process, and when you're submitting documents for sponsor review, etc. It also really helps to make sure that you don't get things muddled up later on. It's easy when you've got multiple versions of documents going backwards and forwards to lose track of which one is the current one. And also similarly, if you ever have to submit an amendment to your ethics approval, you will then have to usually have to update some documentation. So really helpful in terms of keeping track of things. Include an introduction which just sets the context and includes some background so that there is a justification for your study, and include a statement of purpose that is structured along the lines of the one shown in the box on this slide. So there are lots of things that you can include in your protocol. This is a list of suggested sections. You might not need them for all studies, and you might need additional sections included depending on what you're doing. But as I said before, it's usual to have some description of the background and also the theoretical framework. Include your aims and objectives. It's important to specify what they are. You might want to include the outcomes that are being measured, or what it is that you're investigating or hoping to explore. You need to include a study design, so a detailed description of how you've planned to undertake your study, including methods of data collection. Included in that should be how you're going to manage your data and store it safely. Include some information about data analysis, so as someone reviewing a protocol, the reader wants to be or needs to be assured that you know how you're going to manage and analyse the data once you've collected it. You might want to include some information on the study setting, how you're going to sample participants, so who are you going to include, your inclusion and exclusion criteria might form part of that. Your approach to recruitment is important, so what are the processes that you're going to follow in terms of approaching and recruiting participants. Following on from that, you want to include a description of your consent process, so you might want to include gaining written consent or audio recorded consent depending on the project that you're undertaking. Include a section on ethics, so the specific issues that are considered in relation to your particular project. What are the ethical issues and how have you sought to address those, and also the ethics process that you have been through to have the project approved. So that might be NHS Research Ethics Committee, or that might be a University Ethics Committee, depending on what you're planning to do. Patient and public involvement in your study should be included. This demonstrates to anyone reviewing your protocol that you have really thought about input from people who have a perspective that is not just a researcher's perspective, but that you've really sought to get the views of people who might take part in your study, or might be carers of people who support those who will take part in your work. Include a section on key contacts, so that would obviously include your own contact details, any other collaborators in the study. You might want to include a contact for the ethics committee, and it really depends on who the key contacts are for your study, and also the sponsor and funder if you have got a funder. There's lots of guidance on the HRA website, which might be helpful if you want a bit of guidance. Another really useful thing to do is ask other researchers if you can have a look at their protocol for studies. It's just helpful to see how other people set those out. So why is it important to have a protocol? I think a protocol really helps you think through exactly how you'll carry out your research. It means that you have to think through every step of that process, and that's really useful. It just makes you think about potential barriers to recruitment, for example, or where you might have issues along the way. So it just helps you really think out the process in detail. It helps to ensure that you are consistent throughout your project, so that you approach it in the way that you set out to. It is actually, if there's a period of time between the initial planning of your project and actually getting started, you can actually forget what you set out to do in detail. So it's really useful just to be able to refer back to that as a sort of manual for your project. It supports timely review of your study. So as I mentioned earlier, you will need to submit a protocol when going through ethics processes and HRA if you need that. So it's really useful for anyone who is reviewing your study in terms of giving approvals. And it can also help you to monitor your progress and evaluate outcomes as you progress through your research process. So in terms of useful links, as I mentioned, the HRA website is really useful. It's got lots of examples, and particularly if you're doing research within the NHS, if you follow the guidance on the HRA website, it will mean that when you come to seek research ethics and HRA approval, you will have constructed your protocol in a way that is acceptable to those reviewing bodies. So really useful information there. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of a research protocol development and what you might want to include. It's not an exhaustive list, but it is just a quick guide to why you might want to do it and what you want to include in it. Thanks very much.